Once upon a time there was a little girl called Lucy who lived at a farm called Little Town. She was a good little girl, only she was always losing her handkerchiefs. One day little Lucy came into the farmyard crying, and oh, did she cry so! I've lost my handkerchiefs, 3 handkerchiefs and a penny. Have you seen them, Tabby Kitten? But the kitten went on washing his white paws and completely ignored her. So Lucy asked a speckled hen, Sally Henny Penny, have you found 3 handkerchiefs? But the hen ran around in the barn clucking, I'm sorry, I don't use handkerchiefs. If I need to wipe my nose, I simply use one of my claws. And then Lucy asked Cock Robin, sitting on a twig. Cock Robin looked sideways at Lucy with his bright black eye, and he flew over a fence and off and away. Lucy scrambled up a hill as fast as her stout legs would carry her. She ran along a steep pathway up and up until Little Town was right away down below. She could have dropped a pebble down a chimney. Presently she came to a spring bubbling out from the hillside. Someone had stood a tin can upon a stone to catch the water, but the water was already running over, for the can was no bigger than an egg cup, and where the sand upon the path was wet, there were footmarks of a very small person. Lucy ran on and on. The path ended under a big rock. The grass was short and green, and there were clothes, props cut from bracken stems, with lines of plaited rushes, and a heap of tiny clothespins. But no handkerchiefs. But there was something else. A door, straight into the hill, and inside it someone was singing. Lily white and clean, with little frills between, oh, smooth and hot, red rusty spot, oh, never has been seen, oh. Lucy knocked once, twice, and interrupted the song. A little frightened voice called out, Who's that? Lucy opened the door, and what do you think was inside the hill? A nice clean kitchen with a flagged floor and wooden beams, just like any other farm kitchen, only the ceiling was so low that Lucy's head nearly touched it, and the pots and pans were small, and so was everything else there. There was a nice hot singy smell, and at the table with an iron in her hand stood a very stout, short person, staring suspiciously at Lucy. Her print gown was tucked up, and she was wearing a large apron over her striped petticoat. Her little black nose went sniffle, sniffle, snuffle, and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and underneath her cap, where Lucy had yellow curls, that little person had prickles. Who are you? Said Lucy. Have you seen my handkerchiefs? The little person made a bop curtsy. Oh, yes, if you please. My name is Mrs. Tiggywinkle. Oh, yes, if you please. I'm an excellent clear starcher. And she took out something from a clothes basket, and she spread it on the ironing blanket. What's that thing? Said Lucy. That's not my handkerchief. Oh, no, if you please. That's a little scarlet waistcoat belonging to Cock Robin. And she ironed it and folded it and put it on one side. Then she took something else off a clothes horse. Isn't that my penny? Said Lucy. Oh, no, if you please. That's a damask tablecloth belonging to Jenny Wren. Look how it's stained with currant wine. It's very bad to wash," said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. Mrs. Tiggywinkle's nose went sniffle, sniffle, snuffle, and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and she fetched another hot iron from the fire. "There's one of my pocket handkerchiefs," cried Lucy, "and there's my penny." Mrs. Tiggywinkle ironed it, and goffered it, and shook out the frills. "Oh, that is lovely," said Lucy. "And what are those long yellow things with fingers like gloves?" "Oh, that's a pair of stockings belonging to Sally Henny Penny. Look, she's worn the heels out with scratching in the yard. And then she'll have to do without stockings, which would be awful, because that girl, I tell you, she just has a pair of bird legs. Well, of course, she's a chicken." "Why, there's another handkerchief, but it isn't mine, it's red." "Oh, no, if you please. That one belongs to old Mrs. Rabbit, and it did so smell of onions. I've had to wash it separately. I just can't get out the smell." "Why, there's another one of my handkerchiefs," said Lucy. "What are those funny little white things?" "That's a pair of mittens belonging to Mr. Kittens. I only have to iron them. He washes them himself." "Why, there's my last handkerchief," said Lucy. "And what are you dipping into the basin of starch?" "They're little dicky shirt fronts belonging to Tom Titmouth. Most terrible peculiar," said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. "Now I've finished my ironing. I'm going to air out some of these clothes." "What are these dear, soft, fluffy things?" said Lucy. "Oh, those are woolly coats belonging to the little lambs of Lottie-Dot." "Will their jackets take off?" asked Lucy. "Oh, yes, if you please. Look at the sheep mark on the shoulder. And here's one marked from Gatesgarth, and 3 that come from Littletown. They were always marked at washing," said Mrs. Tiggywinkle. And she hung up all sorts and sizes of clothes, small brown coats of mice, one little velvety black moleskin waistcoat, and a red tailcoat with no tail belonging to Squirrel Nutkin, and a very much shrunk blue jacket belonging to Peter Rabbit, and a petticoat not marked that had gone lost in the washing, and at last the basket was empty. Then Mrs. Tiggywinkle made coffee, a cup for herself and a cup for Lucy. Lucy didn't much care for it. She preferred Starbucks. But Mrs. Tiggywinkle had no Starbucks anywhere near, and so Lucy made the best of it. Mrs. Tiggywinkle's hand, holding the coffee cup, was very, very brown, and very wrinkly from all the soap suds. And all through her gown and her cap there were hairpins sticking out wrong end out, and Lucy didn't like to sit too close to her. When they had finished coffee, they tied up the clothes in bundles, and Lucy's pocket handkerchiefs were folded up inside her nice, clean penny and fastened with a silver safety pin. And then they made up the fire with turf, and came out and locked the door and hid the key under the door sill. Then away down the hill trotted Lucy and Mrs. Tiggywinkle, with the bundle of clothes. All the way down the path, little animals came out of the fern to meet them. The very first were Peter Rabbit and his sidekick, Benjamin Bunny. She gave them their nice clean clothes, and all the little animals and birds were so very much obliged to dear Mrs. Tiggywinkle, although many of the animals were heard to say, "Doesn't she realize we're birds? We wear feathers. We don't wear suits and jackets." At the bottom of the hill, when they came to the fence, there was nothing left to carry except Lucy's one little bundle. Lucy scrambled up the wall with the bundle in her hand, and then she turned to say good night and to thank the washerwoman. But the very odd thing, Mrs. Tiggywinkle had not waited either for thanks or for the washing bill. She was running up the hill. And where were her white frilled cap, and her shawl, and her gown, and her petticoat? And how small she had grown, and how brown, and covered with prickles. Why, Mrs. Tiggywinkle was nothing but a hedgehog. Now some people say that little Lucy had been asleep upon the fence. But then how could she have found 3 clean handkerchiefs and a penny pinned with a silver safety pin? And besides, I have seen that door into the back of the hill called Cat Bells. And besides, I am very well acquainted with dear Mrs. Tiggywinkle.